All flights are now boarding. Welcome to Indie Game International.
Welcome to the podcast. I am here today with Oliver Ulrich from Studio Fizbin. But Oliver, what is your title over there at Studio Fizbin?
It's basically just producer. I guess that's the most accurate description of it.
Okay, so I have never interviewed anyone who holds that title, I don't believe. Tell me, what is a producer when it comes to independent video game development?
Well, I guess the title producer kind of derives from film, where the producer does most of the financial stuff and takes care of the organizational things. And there are parts of this role that apply to game development as well. For example, as a producer, you have to make sure everything goes in time and in budget. But you have, game development is a very complex process with people from very, very fields and disciplines working together. And most of the time, I try to make sure that everybody understands each other and that meetings go well and so on. So it's kind of it's a moderation role, and you try to ensure that communication goes well. That's basically it.
Okay, you mentioned money, financing. Is that how? Maybe like what is the percentage of your time devoted to finances versus leading the team or managing people?
Well, for me, it's like I typically don't do like the big finance plans for the studio and stuff. That's kind of more like studio management and acquisition and all that. What I get is basically, okay, this is your amount of money that you can spend on things, and now I have to spend it purposefully and with constraints in mind and all that stuff. So it's basically not so much finance. It's more about ensuring that everything works well within an existing project. So most of it is definitely, I'm in meetings a lot. I think I feel like I'm talking 75% of my working time.
Okay, so what specific skill sets or experience do you have that makes you the perfect person to hold the producer role?
That sounds kind of like I'm in an application interview, right? Well, I guess it's not about like a hard skill specifically. It's first of all, you have to be open all the time to new stuff and listen very carefully to people. And I think this is a skill in itself. And additionally, I have, from my studies, I have a background in interaction design, so I know kind of how interaction works, how game design basically works. I have a basic understanding of that. So I have the ability to understand what a game developer needs, what a programmer needs, what a designer needs, and so on. And then I can funnel these different ideas and approaches with good listening skills, basically, into one coherent thing. So it's not like you have to know a specific programming language. What you have to do is to analyze how your team works, how your team functions, where weaknesses are. And so it's an observing role and then deciding what to do with the results from your observations.
Okay, that is fascinating. And if this was a job interview, I would totally hire you. So yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, as I had mentioned earlier, my developer friend had questions about the producer role, so that's why I'm kind of sticking to that here in the beginning.
Sure.
At what point does a development team require a dedicated producer, would you say?
That is a good and a very important question. I I'd say like if you, for example, if you're just one or two people on a project, you don't need a producer. But when you're like, say you're like a team of 5 people, then your team can already benefit from having a producer. Because usually if, for example, if a programmer has to think about moderation and financing stuff, that just takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to do. So the first thing is a producer takes the weight of the other team members there. And the other thing is a producer is kind of in a neutral position. So as a producer, of course, you have a lot of passion for the game, but you don't have like passion for specific design ideas. Your job as a producer is to make sure that the ideas can actually develop and be shipped. So you have the advantage as a producer that you can also say, okay, I think this idea is cool, but I think we can't ship it for some reason. Maybe it's too complicated to implement. And this is something that is hard to do if you're kind of developing the idea. So I think this is the case for small teams and of about 5 people, then a producer can help. And when you're 10 people and above, you definitely need a producer because otherwise things can go haywire in my experience.
That's very good advice. Thank you so much. So I'm wondering, what is the difference between producer and director when it comes to gaming?
I've heard the metaphor that that every game has basically 2 parents, like the producer and the director. And what the director does is he holds the vision for the game and knows how the game should be done and feedbacks the game design ideas. He tries to make sure that everything stays within the vision. A producer tries to help with that, but doesn't necessarily provide feedback all the time to design ideas. I mean, what I do, for example, is I compare our game to the market out there and try to see if we still manage to reach the target audience with what we do. But what the game director doesn't do is like moderate meetings and all that stuff. That's more of my side. So it's and I don't feedback a lot to the art director, for example. So the vision part and the game design part is more on the director's side, and then I do more of the organizational stuff. And additionally, if there is conflicts in team which happens in every team, I guess, I'm the one who tries to smooth those conflicts out. For example, there might be a conflict between a game designer and the director because the visions, they have kind of collide. And then I have to try to see, where did we come from? What was the vision that we had? Where are we going now? And then try to mediate between those 2 positions.
Okay, that's fascinating. So additionally, this developer friend of mine, one other observation that he made that I would love to get your feedback on is he mentioned that, in his opinion, the most effective way to get the people around him, he worked in smaller teams of like 2 or 3 developing games. He mentioned that the most effective way, in his opinion, to get the people around him to follow his vision was to actually show them the game. But so maybe in your situation, you're not actually making the game, yet you're in charge of motivating a whole group of people, right? Do you find that difficult to not be the one making the game, trying to get people to make the game, if that makes sense?
Well, it can be difficult at times, especially like it's not just with the team, but we have projects that we do with clients, so we don't just do our own games, basically. It's always the easiest if you can show the final product. The problem is you can't show the final product because you can't actually show the final product because it's still in production, right? It can be hard sometimes. What I typically do as a producer is I try to pick different people who have different ideas and then make them talk to each other. So, for example, let's say I review the work of an artist. By reviewing, I mean basically I look at it and think something of it that's not like a feedback process there. And then I see the work of a game designer, and I feel like these 2 things contradict. then it's not my problem to solve this, because you're right, I don't make the game. But what I do is, hey, people, we have a problem there. Can we please talk this through? And then I'll schedule a meeting and we'll sit there and try to figure things out.
Very interesting.
So the most effective thing is, I guess, to as I said, to very quietly observe the things. And then when you think you have something there, then you bring the right people together.
Okay, fascinating. How long have you held the producer role at Studio Fizbin?
I've been I joined Studio Fizbin in 2016, but not full time because I was still a student back then. And then I started as a full employee in 2018. So it's been about 3 to 4 years, 3, 4, 5, depending on what you want to see. Yes.
So, in your opinion, what is the most effective way to motivate people?
Well, I wish there was a silver bullet, but there is none. I think the most effective way is, first of all, not trying to find the silver bullet. I think that is basically a big mistake that especially in the first 2 years, in 2016, 2017, I thought there might be such a thing, but there is actually not. What you do is, it's as a producer, you work with people. And for example, everyone knows from the private lives, you have friends, and every friend you have is different, and such is every colleague. Every colleague is different. So what you have to do, I think, is figure out how to motivate each and every single person. That takes a lot of effort, that takes a lot of time, but I think there's no such thing as the way of motivating people. One certain way of demotivating people is to force something upon them. That is definitely something that I've experienced. Because, for example, in project management, which is my domain, obviously, there are different methodologies how you can manage your project. And one of the well-known ones is Scrum, and Scrum is scary in the beginning, and a mistake can be that you try to enforce Scrum by the book, and maybe it doesn't work for the team you are trying to implement it in. So what you have to do is adjust that and listen to the people, and then a methodology or a working pattern can become motivating. So it's always a back and forth and listening a lot.
Okay, that is great advice. Thank you so much. So based on the dates you just gave me, I would assume that you're relatively young.
Yeah, I'm 27, yeah.
Okay. Have you always wanted to do this? Have you always wanted to be a video game development producer?
No, definitely not. I kind of slipped into this role. As I said, in my studies, I was not in a management role. I definitely, my studies was called interactive design, or interaction design. So, or interactive systems, I should say. So there was a part of design and a part programming. And I think that was great, and it was fun, and it was very fulfilling for me, sure. But there was always this empty spot. I thought maybe later on it would be cool to have a team, and teams are a thing that you need some skills for. Mainly you need experience, and as I said, you have to listen, and you have to know how companies work and all that stuff. And I didn't have I didn't learn any things about that in university. So what I did is I applied at Studio Fizbin just to basically jumpstart and get into this management thing just for curiosity reasons, and then I stick with it. Because it's actually really, really fun and can be very fulfilling. Sometimes it certainly drags more compared, for example, than if you're a game designer, you can finish up work and say, okay, today I designed a new level. That's cool. As a producer, you can say, yes, I've answered 5 emails today. And of course, the first thing sounds cooler, but in the long run, producer can be a very rewarding role.
So at what point were you ever motivated by video games?
I was motivated by video games in my studies because interactive systems can be a lot of things. I mean, you have interactive systems in your car, you have interactive systems on your smartphone everywhere. But kind of, to me, video games are one of the pinnacle of interactive systems because they are very complex and you do very complex things in a game. Like, for example, if you take a classic, maybe a AAA role-playing game, for example, let's say Assassin's Creed, it's a big brand everybody knows. It's a very complex game. I mean, in one of the latest entries, you're a Viking running around the whole British countryside, so to say, and killing people, going on heists, going on boats, and all that complex stuff has to be actually performed by a player who's sitting on a couch. That in itself sounds very ridiculous and fascinating to me. So this is just a design thing that no other medium does as consistently as video games. Video games always face this huge, huge challenge of making a normal person doing very extraordinary and over-the-top things, and that is what I like about it.
That's a very interesting take on video games as a whole. It's interesting that you say how complex they are, and you obviously would know better than most people how complex making a video game is. And I don't think that most gamers realize, or at least, I mean, I've been a gamer since I was like 9, and I don't remember at what point I realized this is a very complex thing that takes many very talented people, or sometimes few talented people. I don't think gamers realize just how complex video games are. Do you agree? Do you think they realize since you're on the inside?
Well, I don't think that I want to judge all the gamers out there by I think that wouldn't be appropriate. Surely some gamers notice it and some are not interested in it. There are different players and different people all over the world, right? But what is interesting that often I also, for example, when we watched the streams of the streams after we released our games, our latest ones, there were definitely people who realized how difficult and how awesome some tiny things are. For example, if you as a game developer, let's say you put an Easter egg into a level. This Easter egg can be a very, very tiny thing, but in reality, probably some person has maybe put an effort of maybe 1 day or maybe even 1 week or even more into this one tiny Easter egg. And I think if people are happy about that and realize, oh, somebody actually thought about that, that is when I feel the game succeeded and when game development is at its most rewarding.
Yes, and I think especially the game I played by Studio Fizbin, Minute of Islands, like that game is so lovingly detailed. Like I was so amazed by that game. I'm curious. So the two games that we haven't really talked about the games yet. So the two games that I played were Minute of Islands and Say No More. Both games were released in 2021, right?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, it was not quite planned. It kind of happened, yeah. But we had another game, Lost at Sea, that was also released in 2021, and in parallel, we had 3 other projects with clients. So basically, I had to manage 6 projects in parallel, wow, which was insane, to be honest. I hope that I don't have to do that again very soon. Yeah, so sometimes things happen. You have to adjust some plans. You have to, maybe some people come, some people leave the project. That's how it goes. And then things as delays happen. For example, Minute of Islands had a delay. And that's just how it works. Then you have to deal with releasing all at the same time, which is a very weird thing, actually. It felt very weird on that day when you knew, okay, we've worked on this for the past 3 years, and now all our babies are suddenly left home. It feels crazy.
That is crazy. I didn't know that Lost at Sea had come out in 2021. Which of the 3 games entered development first?
The first one was Minute of Violence.
Really?
Yes.
I think that's the most recent one, correct? Or no?
I think Lost at Sea, the first one was Say No More, then Minute of Violence, and then Lost at Sea. But it's not always connected to the development cycle, because there are also publishing, and publishers are, of course, looking for the best time to release a game. So that's not necessarily tied to when the development ends.
Okay, so let's get into the specific games. Alexandra Dahlberg over at Zoink Games, she called out Studio Fizbin specifically for the game Say No More. Give us the elevator pitch for Say No More.
Say No More is a game about you being an intern at a huge company, and everybody bullies you and treats you very badly. And at the end of the game, you actually have the courage to stand up against this. You unite your coworkers and you overthrow the company. So it's a very empowering story about how important the word no is and how it's important to stand up for yourself.
Okay, yes, I played it. It's totally wacky, but it's also totally awesome and very empowering. When did you first become aware of the idea for this game?
Our game director, Marius, who I think he was the main contact for Alexandra back then. He came up with the idea. And with one of his friends together, they came up with the idea, and they played around with what they love to do in games generally is to irritate NPCs, because that's fun. If you do something unexpected and the game kind of reacts in a weird or quirky way, that's always fun. And then they began tinkering around with different stuff, and suddenly thought, okay, it's actually quite cool if you just can shout no at their faces. And this is the basic interaction that is the most fun that you can have with NPCs. And then they basically decided for the elevator pitch to strip that down. So to this day, the only thing you can do in this game is basically say no, which sounds crazy at first, but it really works in this example. So it was an idea by Marius, and then together as a team, we refined it and made it what it is today.
Okay, yes, it is extremely unique and hilarious. Who wrote the game?
The game was like the basic plot was developed by Marius, and then we have an author on the game, whose name is Brendan Gibbons. He worked on Minute of Violence as well, which is kind of crazy to think because the games are so vastly different and convey so much different moods. But Brendan has quite a range. He's really good. Yes,
I mean that is a theme, I think, for my thinking and preparation for this interview, is just how different Minute of Violence and Say No More are. I think it's very impressive that Studio Fizbin is able to put out such different types of games in terms of theme and atmosphere. It's almost like hard to think of questions for Say No More. Was it always an idea from the start to have? I think it's so funny that you can say no in like 50 different languages.
That was an idea that we had quite early on, because we felt like it should be you that is empowered and feels empowered about it. So this is why we have an extensive character creator in the game,
right?
Because we want you as a player to be able to experience to feel empowered and to basically stand up for yourself. And language is obviously a big part of that. And so that was definitely an idea that we had in the beginning. In the beginning, we also had more ideas for even more mechanical things. For example, maybe you could choose different pathways and not follow just one rail. But we stripped that because we thought it would take the focus of the game away. And what we have now is it's a small game, but it's a very tightly packed game. Yes. It's like 1 to 2 hours, really jam-packed fun. That's what we were trying to make.
Yeah, and I would say that because of the, I guess, slightly passive nature of the role of the player, meaning all you can do is say no. If it wasn't so funny and it wasn't so well written, then it might not work. But because it is, it's almost like a little TV episode or something. It's a
comedy,
right?
It's a comedy with a very important message behind it. I think that's what makes a good comedy in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases it's cool to have fun and then take something away from it. And this is what I think the end of the game definitely achieves. It shows you, even if we approach it in this wacky, funny way, and in this very approachable way, how important and how grave this whole issue actually is. It's Studio Fizbin, for example. It's not like we shout no all day long. We also say a lot of yes, but what we try to do is we try to embody the essence of the say no more vision within our company. If something bugs you, or if something doesn't work with you, or if you think we're on the wrong track with a product or with a game, it's very important in our company that you actually speak out loud, and nobody will judge you any badly for that. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's really great. I had a feeling that the company that made the game felt similarly to the message in the game, so I very much appreciate that. Let's talk about Minute of Violence, because personally, as a gamer, Minute of Violence is basically like, when I think of my ideal indie game, it's basically Minute of Violence. I like a slow.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I like a slow burn, gorgeous visuals, good story, like 2D platformer. Like I said, I had no idea that I was also going to be able to play Minute of Violence in addition to Say No More for this interview. So when I played it, I was very, very pleasantly surprised. Just it's weird because I am a fan first, 100% when it comes to Minute of Violence. So just tell me, when did you first become aware of the idea for this game?
It began in 2018, and we consolidated different ideas from different team members in like kind of a game jammy style of manner. And the story kind of came to be for itself. We in the beginning, we were also thinking about if we would lean more into the platforming aspect than into the story aspect. And I'm glad we didn't, because I think that would take a lot of away of the game. So yeah, it took some time. It was not an easy game. We had many iterations in which we had to refine the vision and actually talk about what the game really is and what it should be. So it's not there's not kind of a point in time where I came to be aware of the idea of Minute of Violence. We refined it over a long course.
So you just said it sounds like you had a lot of conversations about what the game is and what it should be. So yeah. What is the game and what should it be?
The game is, technically it's a 2D puzzle platformer with light puzzles and light platforming, but its focus is definitely on the story and on experiencing the world. We, as Studio Fizbin, we come from a point-and-click background, So we made point-and-click adventures before Minute of Islands. But the problem is with point-and-click adventures, it kind of takes away the immersion a bit from time to time because you can't actually grasp the world. And in Minute of Islands, you can grasp the world. You can climb on the islands. You can walk to places. All that stuff that you can't really do in point-and-click adventures. So what we tried to do, and what for me the game is, it's a very heartfelt and a very deep and personal, emotional story that is presented in the code of a puzzle platformer. But every aspect of this puzzle platformer supports the story in every single way.
Okay, the game has a very palpable atmosphere. It's very visually, it's gorgeous, but it's also creepy. I don't really know how to describe it.
Yes, it's very creepy.
Like how the boat that she drives in, it's kind of like, it's like bionic. It's like living, kind of. How was it difficult to find that tone, to balance that tone and get that atmosphere right? And was it supposed to be like that from the beginning?
I mean, we wanted to lean into the creepy aspect right from the beginning because we knew there are these giants underground, and we wanted to have them from the beginning. And what was difficult is actually to really lean into it. I mean, as you said, we tried to make every machine, every single tech thing that is in the game, we tried to make it feel like a weird, organic, living thing. And at the beginning, like at the very early beginning, our artists didn't lean in quite that much, but in conversations with our art director and with our director and with me, we tried to really go for this creepy style and for this harsh contrast between this beautiful world that you want to look at, but definitely not live in. I think that creates a very lovely tension. And it's also like the main character of the game, Mo, has this tension within herself. She is actually fundamentally a good person, but she doesn't behave like one. So it's kind of a mirror of her, of her inner self. She has also buried herself underneath the surface of an island and doesn't want to come out. So yeah, it's kind of a huge metaphor for Mo.
Okay, I love that character Mo. She is so adorable. I think I had asked you in an email, and I'm wondering if you have the answer. When you're running around as her, she has no arms, but then when she has to do something, they kind of like come out of her little poncho. Where are her arms when you're running around?
I think they're in the poncho. I don't know, okay. But there are concept artworks, I think, where she's climbing and all that stuff. So, but the arms will look kind of weird if she wouldn't use them, and she looks much cuter, and it looks so cuddly when she has the arms inside the poncho. So I think that was the right decision there.
Yeah.
But I like to think they're in the poncho. I don't think they go away.
I thought that was very funny. Like when I first started playing, I was like, she just has no arms, but then they would come out and she would use them. But
but the arms in animation, actually, that's a fun thing to tell maybe. In animation, those arms were kind of trouble at sometimes because, there are these wheels. If you want to open those, more turns on the wheels. And for some technical reason that I can't quite recall, we animated an additional arm. So actually, when Mo turns the wheel, her hand that is shown to the player isn't actually the real hand. So it's like a fake hand. It's kind of creepy, right?
Yeah. I mean, it goes along. It wouldn't surprise me if she had a third arm in that game. I'm curious about the art style. We don't have to get too technical, but how do you achieve? Is that hand drawn? How do you achieve that art style? Okay.
It's definitely hand drawn. It's which is kind of an insane approach to making a video game, because normally, especially in platformers, you would say, okay, let's make a box and then duplicate or multiply it 100 times and then put it in in the level here and there and so on. So you make it modular, which makes the game obviously more performant because the computer just has to hold one object, right? But in Minute of Islands, we decided we wanted to go all in on the art style because our art director, Tim Getke, he's a published comic book artist, and he's generally very inspired by Franco-Belgian comics, like Tintin is one of the inspirations, and others. It's the style that he draws in. That's just how he draws. I don't know how he manages to do that, but if he makes a drawing, it looks like Minute of Islands. And what we tried to do is we wanted to make this as unique and pretty as possible, and this is why we have not zero, but not many modular things in this game. The whole background, the whole islands are basically giant, 16 or more K wallpapers that you walk across, and everything is hand-drawn, yeah.
When you say modular, do you mean things moving?
No, I mean like these boxes I was talking about, like duplicating, like for example, in Minute of Islands, you could have a rock and then you could turn this rock around so you don't recognize it immediately and then put it to the left. But we didn't do that. We just hand drew every single rock in the game.
Okay, yeah. So that is evident. I mean, I didn't know that while I was playing it. I mean, I figured, but the point is it achieves, I think, the goal you set out to achieve. The game is absolutely gorgeous. But also like that creepy H.P. Lovecraft gorgeous, you know what I mean? Like toward the end, there's a part where you're on like a tower of like shark carcasses, and it's so horrifying, but also beautiful. It's very weird. Okay, so again, I don't know how much you'll know about this, but I'm curious. Just were you around for any kind of decision on color palette? Because I find it so interesting when things become iconic. Like when I picture Mo, I picture yellow and dark blue, right?
Well, at first she was red.
Okay, so tell me about the story about developing the color palette of the game and of her character.
So in the beginning, we figured that she had a red cape, but then we thought of the hazmat suits and of the yellow tint, and we basically our artists drew a board with many characters concept characters that could appear in the game, and the yellows really spoke to us because of the danger a lot of danger comes across if you see those characters in these yellow suits. And then additionally to the color palette, we had a color script that we prepared, so we knew what colors we wanted the game to be tinted in at the start of the beginning. But every single island has like its own tiny key visual or a target shot, so to say, a representative artwork that we wanted it to look at. And then after we finished all the islands, we applied some color tinting to it to strengthen the color script. So I think in the beginning you have much lighter tones, then it becomes green and bluish in the middle and red at the end, or shortly before the end, if I recall it. There's a lot of thought went into the color.
That's fascinating.
Starting with the characters and with what the yellow suits actually convey, and then we try to adjust the color for every single island for the mood it should convey.
Okay, so I'm curious, without, I guess, getting into spoilers, what are, like, I found Mo to be very likable, right? She doesn't say much, but she's very, like, cute. I like how she rubs her hands together, like, before she uses something, does something with her hands, or how she coughs when the yellow stuff comes, and how she kind of checks her surroundings before she climbs through a tunnel. I think all these little animation things that you guys added in are perfect, but isn't her character, like, what are you trying to convey with her character prior to knowing the ending, I guess? I don't know if you have anything to speak to that.
Well, it's an unusual approach in games, I guess, because normally what you would do in I don't want to say, but typical video game, I guess. You want to be the hero. Like, for example, I don't know. One game that I personally love, it's AAA game Dragon Age. Probably a lot of people know it. Yep. And I played it many years ago for many, many hours, and I love to be the hero, and that was great. But we tried to do something very different with Minute of Islands. What we wanted to do is, okay, if you were really the hero, like for reals, what would it actually do to you? And this is what we try to explore within Minute of Islands. So in the beginning, of course, Mo feels very sure of herself. But then after a while, she sees that the task that she's set out to do is actually very huge, maybe even too huge for her. And this makes a hero lonely in kind of in a bad way, actually. And yeah, this is what we want to explore, to make the player feel how it can feel to be overwhelmed with something, and to having to realize that yourself.
Okay, yeah, what you just explained rings totally true to me. I just didn't have the words because I don't know. I'm not the one who made the game, but yes, I think Minute of Islands is one of my all-time favorite indie games. I'll say that. I really, really, really enjoyed the experience, the gameplay, the story, everything about it. But real quick, I'm curious about Lost at Sea because I didn't play it. I didn't even know that you guys made it. Tell me a little bit about that game.
Lost at Sea has a different background than Minute of Islands. In Minute of Islands, we knew we wanted to have a story that goes from A to Z, and we wanted to illustrate this as beautifully as possible. Lost at Sea was the other way around. We knew we wanted to have one island, and we wanted to see what we can do with it. So, yeah, I guess Lost at Sea is a very depressing game. It's kind of not the gameplay itself is depressing, but there are a lot of dark themes in the game, very, very dark themes that I don't want to spoil. Yeah, but what we try to figure out is, first we'll have the island, then we try to make different zones on the island which represent things of a person's life, of a specific person's life, and then see how we can tell a story when the player actually roams quite freely around the island. Yeah, so it was a totally different approach.
Is it first person?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. That sounds really.
And it's 3D. So
right. Yeah,
I guess that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, it looks very nice. Is that the first fully 3D game that Studio Fizbin has made?
Yeah, I think so. But it's definitely the smaller game compared to Minute of Islands. The Minute of Islands is definitely the biggest game that we made.
Okay.
So far.
Very interesting. Well, I absolutely love that game. So thank you for being a part of the team that made it. So I think we can get into I have 4 questions that I ask all my guests. I'd be very curious to hear your answers. So let's get into those. So what is a typical release day like for an indie game developer?
Honestly, I don't know, but because I don't know what a typical release date is, but I can tell you how my release dates feel, and they feel very weird, or felt very weird, because they are a mixture of being very relaxed. Because usually on release day, I mean, as long as you have already planned the updates or the day one patch or something like that, the release day is relaxed because you feel like you've done the work. But then similarly, it's kind of a delay. You've done the work, and now the reactions come in. That's really weird, but it's also very rewarding. Especially with Minute of Islands, we watched many streams online, and it was so cool. I mean, it kind of sounds weird, but it was so cool seeing people cry about the game and sharing each other's tears. That was cool. If we achieved the effect that we wanted, and so release day is hanging out together, watching reactions, and feeling weird about how time flies.
Right. How was Minute of Islands received? I'm surprised that I hadn't heard of it. Like, it took this interview for me to realize that it existed, because it's totally up my alley. How was it received?
It was very well received. We had many positive reviews, but there were also some people who found it really polarizing. For example, I can see while some people want to play the hero and destroy destroy Ganon in the boss fight at the end of Zelda. I see why people want that, but this isn't Minute of Islands. So it can be polarizing at times, but generally it was very well received. Because you can make a screenshot of the game at any given point and it looks like a hand-drawn wallpaper, and that is amazing, and that's something we're really proud of.
Yeah, it's definitely my most screenshotted game on Steam by far.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah, so what is something that you as a developer would like to say to gamers? What is one piece of information that, if you could relay one piece of information to the gamer, what would it be?
That's a difficult question. Let me think about it for a second. I think first of all, I want players to know that game devs value players in general. Because if nobody would play our games, we wouldn't make them. And maybe a thank you for everybody, for everyone who plays the games and shares the games and actually takes their time. Because I feel like nowadays time becomes a more and more valuable resource all the time. Like with so many things to do. Everyone has a life. Everyone has social media. Everyone has a family and friends and all that stuff. And then taking the time to play our game is a privilege. I think that. So I guess thank you to all the gamers. And then another thing maybe is I think Alexandra Dahlberg mentioned that as well as on your podcast. Sometimes the gaming community can be really harsh, especially when delays happen and all that stuff. I want to say that it's not fun to be working on a video game that has been, or maybe working on the video game that has been delayed can be fun, but delaying the video game is not for fun. It's a very hard decision to delay a video game. If a game development studio does this, it is definitely to make the game better. So actually, in kind of a weird way, a delay is a good thing for gamers, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for that answer. I do think that part of the purpose of this podcast is to kind of shed a positive light on game developers. Just kind of say like, hey, these are humans who will sit down for a conversation with me, who's like, I'm just a gamer. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Something that I really don't like is like the quote that you sometimes read. This game isn't any good. It's just lazy game developers again. And that's all. I don't think that's ever the case. Maybe in some very, very rare cases, but like 1 out of 1,000,000. But basically, game developers pour their heart and soul, especially indie game developers, in their projects. So yeah, we're humans. Hi.
yeah, exactly. Well, I'm happy to help make that known. So on the flip side, what is one piece of advice, one distilled piece of advice that you would give your fellow game developers?
Well, I think there are certainly like veterans that know a lot more than me. But if you're just starting out with game development, I think you should, as soon as possible, get accustomed to iterating every single thing. Like not just to the game, because everybody talks like about rapid prototyping and all that stuff, getting playtests early. That's certainly true. But I think it's much broader in game development. You have to iterate on your way of working, of your way of thinking of the game, in my case, for example, as a producer, I constantly have to think and optimize my production methods or methodologies. Like, for example, one team may be perfectly fine with the way I implement rapid prototyping, but then another team might not be, because for example, they have never done rapid prototyping before, or maybe it just doesn't work for them for another reason. Maybe there is restrictions with the content pipeline, whatever. And this means you have to constantly basically question if you're already there. And in most cases, you're probably not. So get used to optimizing all the time. This is actually a good thing. Yeah, it sounds kind of tedious, but actually it can be really fun optimizing stuff.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for that answer. I very much appreciate that. Okay, I got to say a massive thank you to you for joining me once again, for taking the time out of your day to share your knowledge here on this podcast. My final question is, I need to ask you to please call somebody out. Call out another developer who you respect and admire, similarly to the way you were called out. Studio Fizbin was called out by Alexandra Dahlberg. Who do you think I should get on the show?
Well, there are a number of awesome people that will make a great guest on this show. One of them would be probably one of the people at Mimimi Productions. That's a game development studio from Munich in Germany. And I've played their latest two games. What they do is they make like the old Commandos games, like in this style, but beautifully translated to the modern era of gaming. They have one set it in the in medieval Asia, and the other is actually the third entry in the Desperado series, and their games are just gorgeous. I mean, as a kid, I totally was into this kind of genre, but then it kind of died. And then when they kind of revived the whole thing, I was into it from the start, and they just make the greatest top-down stealth games. They look gorgeous. They play hardcore. They're really tough, and they are just very close to perfection. And then maybe just to call them out is Studio Fizbin. We have two offices. One of them is in Berlin, and it's a co-working space. And we sit there with a lot of other great indie companies, with other indie studios. One of them is Machine Mensch. They make the Curious Expedition series, which is kind of an 2D RPG exploration simulation in imperial colony times. And there's Megagon, who does Lonely Mountains Downhill, which is a bike downhill racing simulation where you're chasing the latest high score. So yeah, these are all great people, I guess.
Okay, so this is actually really cool. I very much thank you for those. I'm going to check them out. But this is awesome because this is the first time this has happened. I have actually had Megagon on the show.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay.
So I
didn't know that.
That's okay. I interviewed Jan Bubenik. Do you know him?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I interviewed him a few months ago. Yeah, because I played Lonely Mountains Downhill, and that's a great game. So yeah.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we share the same office.
Really?
Yeah.
That is.
But obviously now we don't talk that much because Corona and all the pandemic stuff. So this is probably why I missed it.
That's so crazy that this is Indie Game International, right? So I've interviewed people from all over the world, from Australia to Japan to Romania, and now I've interviewed two people who share the same office on the other side of the planet. Yeah.
I mean, Berlin is has quite an indie game scene. So
that's so cool.
That's probably where it comes from.
All right. Well, that was a fun surprise, but let's wrap it up. I have to say again, thank you so much for joining me. I absolutely love Minute of Islands. I love To Say No More. I love the work that you guys do. I very much want to check out Lost at Sea now. But real quick, why don't you actually tell the folks at home how can they get in touch with Studio Fizbin? or you on either social media? How do they get the games? Just tell us about that.
You can definitely reach out to Studio Fizbin on social media. We have at Studio Fizbin is our Twitter account. We also have a Facebook page, and there are Twitter accounts for Minute of Islands and for Say No More. They're probably not that active anymore because the games have been out for a while. But if you're interested, you can definitely dig through this. Myself, I'm kind of one of those old-fashioned people who try to stay away from social media. But in general, if you'll find our email address on our website, and for example, if you need support with our games or have any questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you have an amazing day.
Thank you. You too.
Cool.
See ya.
Well, that wraps up the episode. Massive thank you to Oliver for taking the time out of his day to speak with me. I am a huge fan of what Studio Fizbin is doing, and I look forward eagerly to whatever else they put out. Okay, find Studio Fizbin on the web at studio-fizbin.de, and that's Fizbin. They are also on Facebook, and their Twitter handle is at Studio Fizbin. Grab Minute of Islands. Seriously, grab it. It is phenomenal. On Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, and PC. And you can also grab Say No More on Switch and PC. All links will be in the show notes, by the way. Also, this podcast is now on YouTube. So if you want to see my gameplay of either of these games, head over there. The channel is called Indie Game International. Speaking of this podcast and the internet, you can find me on Twitter at IndieGameINTL. Also, you can email me at sumadrepodcasts@gmail.com. That's sumadrepodcasts@gmail.com. Okay, one more thank you to Oliver, and thanks to you for listening, and peace out.